murdered baby, a shallow grave and a village of secrets. This week, the Sunday World shines a new light into the hidden shadows of Dalkey's House of Horrors. We reveal the sensational new evidence that may yet solve a 40-year-old murder mystery.
I want justice.
When you gave birth to your baby in the house with your parents there, what happened when the baby came out? Screaming, I presume, obviously, like any baby comes out.
Would you mind if I don't discuss that because it's a bit traumatic?
Okay, no, I don't mind in the slightest, but suffice to say, the baby was... I'm not quite sure what sort of language to use here,
yeah.
But the baby, well, we have to say that the baby was killed. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yeah.
By your mother?
Yeah.
Okay. And she did it in a way that probably is beyond mention, even though you talk about it. Can you tell us, when your baby is killed in front of you as an 11-year-old child, what did your mother do next or say next with the body?
Well, when she was stabbing my baby, she said to me that it was my fault, that I assumed that she was talking about my father because she was saying, this is your fault, look what you've made me do. You wouldn't keep away from him. I told you to keep away from him, but you wouldn't listen to me.
In a case that became known as the Dalkey House of Horrors, a baby born to an 11-year-old girl was stabbed to death on April 4th, 1973. The baby was born through incest and rape. Cynthia Owen's father had raped her since she was just 8 years old. This is her story. Come join me, Holly, in the murder she shed for this rarely discussed true crime case. If you don't mind, smash the subscribe button, hit the like, so you can find this informed nerd again in this big YouTube world. A nerdy girl can get lost in here, and I often do. Thanks to my friend Nikki from Canada for making me an informed nerd. It makes me sound super smart and like a super nerd. No, it's not a plane. It's not a bird. It's Holly, the super nerd, at your service. You're welcome. Just joking around with y'all. Before we begin, this case involves the essay and abuse of a little girl, so viewer discretion is advised. This case is very similar to a case I talked about a couple of videos back, a bad case. Because like that case, it is family filled with incest. In fact, the details of what the survivor had to go through are so disturbing. I had to actually water her story down to keep this video from being kicked off YouTube. It's that bad. This case was suggested by a new subscriber named Casey or Cassie. Not sure how you pronounce it. Thanks for the suggestion, Casey or Cassie. Think it's probably Cassie the way it's spelled. But thank you. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for telling me about this story. Cynthia Owens lived in the beautiful village of Dalkey, Ireland in a house of horrors located at 4 White's Villas. Cynthia's parents were Peter and Josie Murphy, and they were both alcoholics. Her father had grown up in an orphanage where he was SI'd from a little boy. Her mother, Josie, had her first baby when she was just 17, and she married Peter after she became pregnant with her second child. Cynthia had 9 siblings, and they all lived in a little 2-bedroom house, a dirty house. The house always smelled like cigarettes and urine. Cynthia and her siblings had lice in their hair and fleas in their bed. There was no heat in the home, so it was always very cold. But the blankets and sheets were so filthy and stunk. The only thing they had to keep warm with, they were just nasty, disgusting, and they had no choice but to use them or freeze. The family only had an outhouse to urinate in, and as it was so cold all the time, then they put a pan at the foot of the bed, and everyone would just urinate and defecate in that, and it was left to Cynthia to dump out. So daily she was made to go dump this pan of nasty out. The children had no shampoo and soap and rarely were allowed to take baths. The mom, Josie, would sit in her chair all night and drink and just knit. She usually wouldn't go to bed until 7 in the morning and then sleep all day. She was a very controlling woman who loved to cause fights between all of her children. Her dad, Peter, would work all day and then go to the pub all evening. He'd come home at night. He'd come home drunk most nights and fight with Josie. Peter made good money, but they would blow it all on cigarettes and alcohol. When Cynthia turned 7, her mama made her start sleeping in the bed with her own father. At 7 years old, she was so confused when her daddy would grind against her in bed. Every day, her mother and sometimes her father would beat her, and every night she was forced to crawl in bed with her own father, while her mother stayed up and just rocked and knitted in her chair all night. Josie knew what was happening to her little girl in that bed, but did nothing because she wanted it to be her daughter instead of her having to have sex with her husband, whom she constantly fought with. Josie would tell Cynthia all the time that she was her least favorite child and that she was just a little bitch. Cynthia did not even know what it meant. The man Cynthia called Dad forced himself on her every night. Started out slow with the grinding until one night he made her perform sex on him. Some days when Cynthia attended the local convent school, she would go to school with her father's semen in her hair. I know this is disturbing. Cynthia had no hairbrush, so her hair would always be a mess, but it would get all crusty some days from the abuse during the night. It's a rough one. I told you guys it's bad, and it's going to get worse. She would attend school with dirty, ragged clothes, unbrushed hair and teeth, and though she was still treated badly by the other children and nuns at the school, at least the school was warm and she was safe from her parents' abuse when she was at school. The nuns would often tell Cynthia that she stinks and that she needed to bathe herself. Cynthia was too afraid to tell them that she was not allowed to bathe at home. By the time Cynthia turned 8, her dad had raped her, and sometimes when she resisted, he would even take and tie his belt around her arms and chest, even though her mom knew what was going on in that bedroom. Her mom would take Cynthia upstairs and show her the stains on the bed in order to shame her. She would then make Cynthia take her bottoms off, lay down, and bite her repeatedly on her thighs for punishment. One evening was a little different because when Peter came home from the pub one night, he had brought a friend home with him. Peter asked Cynthia to come downstairs and sing a song for his friend. Cynthia loved to sing, and she had a beautiful singing voice, but this night something just felt strange and off. Why was her parents asking her to sing for this stranger? She did it. And she was right. There was something strange. It was the first time her parents sold her for money, cigarettes, and alcohol. After this, behind her dad's back, her mom would send Cynthia to her Uncle Frank. Uncle Frank was the husband of her mom's older sister, or her mom's sister's husband. Cynthia's aunt. Let's put it that way. Yeah, Cynthia's aunt. Peter hated Frank, so Frank only came over when Cynthia's father was at home. Sometimes Cynthia was sent to Frank's house, where she was essayed not only by Frank, but her aunt too. Afterwards, they would send Cynthia home with some alcohol and pills for her mom. She was not the only aunt that abused Cynthia. Josie's younger sister, who lived with her mom, would also abuse Cynthia, her other aunt. Her name was Aunt Ann. And when Cynthia's granny would leave the house, Cynthia would be forced to go visit Aunt Ann. Ann would then make Cynthia go to her bed, where she also abused her. One night, after the other children had went to bed, her mom said, "Come on, Cynthia, we're going out. Your dad is already there." Cynthia didn't know where there was, but she knew from past experience that this sounded really bad. She would have never guessed the nightmare she was fixing to walk into. Her mom first gave her drugs and sedated her a little, but Cynthia still remembered most everything that happened to her that night. Josie pulled up to a creepy-looking dark building. Cynthia walked into a dark room where candles were flickering. She could just see the outlines of several men in this cold room. She recognized her dad's face as he walked towards her laughing. All the men began touching her and passing her around. there was a table in the middle of this cold room. They laid Cynthia on it, and each took turns raping her. Peter then led her outside to her mother, who was smiling and laughing at her when she came out of that room. She thought it's so funny. Her mother drove her home. There were actually several times after that when Cynthia was brought into this building that her own mother would participate in this abuse too. For the next few days, Cynthia was sent to the home of each of these men who had essayed her to collect her parents' payment from each man. Some was money, but some was cigarettes, alcohol, and food. Cynthia was too little to even know why these men were giving her parents things, but she knew these were the men that had actually done such evil things to her in that creepy building. When Cynthia turned 11, she began to feel sick to her stomach. Every morning for months, she would wake up sick. Finally, she went to her mother and told her mother that she was sick, nauseous every morning. Josie said, "No, you're not sick. You're just having a baby." Several months later, Cynthia began having pains and she went into labor. She still didn't understand what was happening to her body until she saw her mother holding this little baby girl after she was born. Josie would soon murder her little baby right in front of Cynthia. I'm going to give a warning that this part is very disturbing. If you'd like to skip this part, I'm going to put a timestamp. You can skip to that time. As the baby was laying in Josie's lap, she began stabbing her in the face and neck with her knitting needles. Cynthia was screaming, "Hand me my baby!" But her mom just repeatedly stabbed this little baby. Josie ran out of the room with the baby. Cynthia got up to try to follow her. The baby was still alive and crying. Josie took the baby to the sink and continued stabbing her. When this didn't kill the baby, she turned the gas on in the oven but didn't light it. Josie then put the baby in the oven full of gas fumes until she saw the baby turn blue and knew she was deceased. Even though she knew the baby was dead, Josie kept stabbing her with the knitting needles and told Cynthia it was all her fault. "I told you to keep away from your daddy." She then made Cynthia walk with her to dispose of the baby's body, whom she had put in a bag. The next day, the baby girl was found by two 11-year-old boys who were on their way home from collecting seaweed, and they needed a bag to put their seaweed in. So they saw this bag. The baby was in. They picked it up to try to put their seaweed in it, but when they opened it, they found the baby's body wrapped in newspapers and soaked in blood. This baby became known as the Dunleary baby because her body was found in a lane in Dunleary. A postmortem examination at the time determined that the baby had suffered a violent death, and a murder investigation was launched. It appeared that the baby had actually been stabbed over 40 times. Despite a police campaign, the baby was never identified, and she was buried in a Holy Angels plot in a Dublin cemetery. 11-year-old Cynthia vowed to get her mother back one day for what she had done to her little baby. The baby was named by Cynthia as Nolene Murphy. Just a few weeks after the baby was born, Cynthia was forced to go through to that creepy building where she was sold to all these men waiting their turn. Her dad also continued to abuse her, and by the time she was 14, she was pregnant again. This time, though, the baby was a stillborn. Afterwards, her dad kicked Cynthia out of his bed because she was just too old for him. He then began abusing Cynthia's younger niece, who was 5 years old, and also her younger brother Martin and her brother Michael. Martin's pain would not go away, and he eventually killed himself. Cynthia had 2 children with her first and second husband. Her third husband was so good to her and even adopted the little boy from her second marriage. After years of keeping her secrets, Cynthia finally went to the police and told them everything her parents had done to her, including Dad had fathered her own baby and then her mother had murdered it so many years ago. The police said that they could not charge her parents for the sexual abuse because after so many years, nothing could be proven. 10 years after Martin had killed himself, his younger niece, who was raised as a sister, Teresa, also ended her life. And also, even her brother, Michael, ended his life. So 3 of her siblings committed suicide. So sad. In 2006, a new inquiry was opened for baby Nolene. Cynthia's mother, Josie, passed away peacefully in the hospital just 3 hours after the inquiry was opened. Peter, her father, called for a judicial review of the inquest in the highest court. He was going to fight any charges every step of the way. And it worked because he passed away 2 years later before any charges were made. Cynthia gives all credit to her faith in God for getting her through the evil times and not suffering the same fate as her siblings. She thinks if it wasn't for God, she would have ended up ending her life too. But through the peace that God gave her, she was able to overcome this evil in her life. Cynthia still visits her baby Nolene's grave and wrote a book called Living with Evil. Living with Evil is how I got a lot of information. And just warning, if you decide to read the book, it is way more graphic than I am telling you about on this video. It is sold in the UK, and it was very hard for me to even locate. She said the book was a way to help her heal from her past. An inquest in 2007 identified baby Nolene as that of Cynthia Owens. Of the 12 men that raped her in that creepy building again and again, she later found out 3 of them were actually officers. One of the officers was actually on duty the day baby Nolene's body had been found. In 2015, the government stated they would not proceed with a public inquiry in the cases because nothing could be proven about these 12 men that were involved in this ring. And so they got away with everything. Her parents, all 12 men, everybody got away with everything they've done to these children in this family. It's just heartbreaking. I could not find any recent updates on Cynthia, but I do hope that she's happy and healthy and doing great in this world today. And I just want to say, baby Nolene, may you forever rest in peace. I love doing YouTube videos about survivors. After they survive their past and come through these things, I just can't imagine how you can even come through these things. But I do like that a person has survived at the end of these. And I like to hear that they are living a happy life now. So that is one plus on this video. Some of the videos that I do, I can't say that, it came out and the person survived. So I'm happy that she was able to get through this and be an overcomer. And she is indeed an overcomer. I can't imagine just living through all this and then being able to start a family of your own and living a happy and healthy life. So I hope that she is. Say bye. Give me your foot. Give me your foot. Say bye. Hey, listen. Give me your foot. Oh, don't say bye. Be rude. Be rude again. You little rude boy. He wants to go have some fun now. Do you love the subscribers at the Murder She Shed? Do you want them to come here weekly? Okay. Maybe they will.